How a protagonist is handled can go a long way to determining the high or low quality of the entire series they're a part of. There's nothing new about that idea, but I wanted to revisit it briefly, because a summer 2017 series came along that gave us what's probably the most perfect example of this fact, because it presents us with a main character that is literally just a poor quality version of another show's high quality protagonist. The bad one is Toya from In Another World with My Smartphone, and the good one is Kazuma from Konosuba. Both shows start identically. The main character is a teenage boy who dies by accident and is told by God that he'll be resurrected in another world, and can choose to bring one thing with him to that world. Other than the obvious fact that Konosuba is a comedy, the only real difference between these two shows so far is the fact that Toya brings a magically functional smartphone while Kazuma brings God herself. It's when they each start their journey that the two protagonists diverge drastically. Kazuma realizes almost immediately that trying to make his way in a brand new world is hard. He has to do weeks of physical labor just to be able to afford to sleep in a barn. He's starting from the absolute bottom, and all of the cool video game-esque things he'd love to be able to do are so far beyond his skill level that the best he can do is scrape together random abilities here and there from whoever's willing to teach him. He ends up with an assortment of random powers that really don't go together and keep him from specializing in any one area. That, plus Kazuma's general lack of knowledge about this world, even down to common sense everyday stuff, prevents him from ever having an easy time overcoming challenges. He does come out on top sometimes, but he has to try his hardest to do it, and often makes personal sacrifices along the way. Toya, on the other hand, was given several upgrades by God himself. All of his physical abilities have been enhanced, so he can win most fights without any combat training. He's got an abnormally strong affinity for all types of magic, and is only really limited by what spells he knows. But God also boosted his memory, so he can memorize entire books just by reading them once, which means he has access to basically any magic spell he could ever need. Among the first spells he learns enhance his senses to the point that he can see, hear, and smell things from miles away. He can teleport himself anywhere he wants, as well as teleporting anything he wants to the palm of his hand. And also cure fatal wounds instantly. I mean, that's not even mentioning the number of ways being the only person with a functioning computer in a medieval setting gives him an advantage. Every single time Toya is presented with a challenge, he overcomes it instantly with little to no effort. 2 episodes in, he cures blindness. Seriously, this woman lost her sight 5 years ago, and doctors and mages who have dedicated their lives to their craft couldn't do anything to help her. Then this guy shows up, snaps his fingers, and it's all better. And it would be one thing if all this meant was that the main character was boring. Because he is. Toya is dull as dirt. He's just a pile of OP abilities that walks around fixing everything. But that's not the big problem. The big problem is he's the main character. He's the character we spend the most time with. He's the character whose eyes we see this world through. And that means how he's written has a dramatic effect on the show as a whole. This world is defined by his interactions with it. And his interactions are easy and bland, so this world comes off as bland. A very basic thing that Smartphone gets entirely wrong is an understanding of the fact that narrative needs conflict. The hero needs to be presented with obstacles, and some of those obstacles need to be too hard for the hero to surpass, at least for a while, because easy victory isn't compelling. It can work once in a while, and even be impressive when it does happen, but it can't be every single time. When Kazuma gets a really cool moment or secures a win against all odds, it actually feels like a victory because you know how hard he worked to achieve it. Trying and failing and trying again builds the character and makes us more invested so that when it's all over and the hero wins, you really feel that he earned it. In Another World with My Smartphone is incredibly dull and forgettable because its main character is designed to prevent the existence of conflict in the story. As long as this character is written this way, nothing interesting can happen. Konosuba's main character is defined by his limits and shortcomings and is constantly learning and improving without ever becoming too powerful. It's such a simple difference that can make or break an entire series, and part of me is glad we have these two examples to illustrate how shows with virtually identical starting points can veer off in totally different directions and become something that everyone has loved and praised for years, and something that'll likely be long forgotten by the time next year rolls around.